Hey guys, so far you have learned how to use Node and Express and how to use WebSocket with that. What if you wanted to create a web app and store information in the database directly? MongoDB is a good choice for JavaScript web apps because in MongoDB you can store JavaScript objects directly. So it works well with Node and Express. So once you download MongoDB and Node.js, and once you get MongoDB installed, this is one tutorial that you can use. Click on try it out. And let's see, we can go through the interactive tutorial. As you can see, as you should know, you should know how to create JavaScript objects. And we can store those JavaScript objects directly in any of the collections. So collections are like tables in SQL. I can save JavaScript object into those collections. I can also retrieve it. Now, you can see as you go through the tutorials that you can also search for particular JavaScript object that's stored in the collections with particular property. You can also update. You can also insert. And you can also remove. So those are the basic MongoDB commands. And of course, if you go through the docs, you can learn a lot more about different commands that is available. Once you get MongoDB installed, you should be able to run Mongo, and you should be able to run these in your terminal as well. So right now I'm connected to a database called DB. I can also say show DBs, which displays all the different databases that I collected. I can switch to another database by just using test. Use and then the name of the database. So I can, for example, use s_test and it switches to that database. So for example, if I want to save in the s_test, okay, in the database, because my DB is pointing to s_test, if I wanted to create a collection called hobbies, and if I want to save a JavaScript object, let's say name basketball. Now that gets saved. I can save baseball, soccer, and if I want to look and find all the records in the hobbies, then it shows all the records along with a unique object ID. Okay, so MongoDB, this Mongo command in the terminal can be very helpful. All right, so now let's switch gears. All right, so what I want you guys to do is to read over this, but also after you get a good understanding on how the file is structured, then to jump to the assignment right away. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to get MongoDB installed. And we're going to use Mongoose to connect to MongoDB. And there are different ways that you can structure your codes. Again, in Express, there's a lot of flexibility on how you can organize your code. So we're going to show you a better way to organize your code, but just know that there is even a better way, but a more complicated way of organizing your code, and that will be introduced in the next chapter. But instead of having you get there right away, we wanted you to really understand what's happening and go there in steps. Okay, so what we're going to do now is I'm going to show you some of the basics of how to set up your Express so that it has Mongoose. So what you can do is you can create an empty Express project by doing Express -EJS and the name of your project. And I already did this. I created this project. Now I restructured some of the things. I removed some of the unnecessary files, like there were some unnecessary files that I removed. And in app.js, instead of, as I did in the previous chapter, I load the routes. But now the routes is in the config folder, okay? And also in the config folder is a Mongoose file that gets loaded, okay? So let's look at the routes file. Shouldn't look, too much different. We'll come over this a little bit later. But the Mongoose file, if you look at it, it basically requires the file stream. And there are two important things. It says, this is the database that I should connect to. So MongoDB localhost, and that's the name of the database. So I'm right now connecting to s_test. If you want to use a different database, then you can just specify it. For example, I can do, for you, I want you to store this in the SSS database or whatever, and it will create that database if it doesn't exist already, and it will store things in that database for you. Okay, so I specify my MongoDB path. It tries to connect. If it couldn't connect, then it logs the error on the terminal. And when the connection is closed, it tries to reconnect. And this is important. What I have also done is I have this models folder. And this is where I'm going to create a model that talks to the MongoDB database. And so what I do in this Mongoose configuration file is to have Express go through each of the file in the models folder and load it, require it, basically. Okay, so that's what happens. Let's go back to the app.js. Okay, once that is done, it calls the routing file. Let's go back to the routing file. Don't worry too much about this, but whatever gets passed to the module export is what gets passed to that variable, right? So in module.exports, what I do is I create a function and I pass the argument app, and I say when someone requests / or the main root, render the index file. And this rendering is still in the views folder. And again, in the next chapter, we'll show you a better way or a more MVC way where you can put the models in the views. But for now, we'll do it in steps. Okay? All right, so the views, there's really nothing new. I have a form that gets submitted to users create. And in the routes, whatever gets sent to users create is handled by whatever I have over here. Don't worry too much about that right now. Okay? So that's what I do. There are a few other things that I do that's a little bit different. Okay? But those are the main differences in terms of these files. And in the next video, I'll talk about how the models are done and how the validations are done as well.